Team. Vote. Left. Face. Present. Colors.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Colors. Right. Face. Forward. March.
Please be seated. I'm going to have...
Okay, well, been working on this for almost a year, but it was a nice ceremony. It was right outside the Capitol, right next to the beautiful Frank Luke statue that has the wrong year of his birth. However, that may get corrected by Veterans Day, we're hoping. Anyway, yes, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about that. This is the program that they had that day, and I'm going to read to you, it's just a little narrative about him, and then I'll tell you what went on briefly. Luke history. Second Lieutenant Frank Luke Jr. was born May 19th, 1897, it has 1898 on the statue, in Phoenix, Arizona. Following America's entry into World War I in April 1917, Luke enlisted in the aviation section, U.S. Signal Corps on September 25, 1917, and received pilot training in Texas and California. After being commissioned a second lieutenant in March 1918, he deployed to France for further training and in July was assigned to the 27th Aero Squadron. From September 12th to the 29th, 1918, Luke made aviation history when he wreaked havoc on the aerial fleets of Germany in his Spad 8. During an 18-day period of which Luke only flew 8 days, he destroyed 18 enemy aircraft, which were 14 surveillance balloons and 4 enemy airplanes. Because he targeted the most dangerous aircraft, the heavily defended surveillance balloons, he became known as the Arizona Balloon Buster. On September 29th, Luke was shot down by ground fire behind enemy lines west of Mervaux, France. Once on the ground, he continued to fight, defending the wreckage of his aircraft with his sidearm until he died from his wounds. Because of his actions, he was the first aviator awarded the Medal of Honor. During its construction in 1941, Litchfield Park Air Base in West Phoenix was redesignated Luke Field in his honor and memory. Today it is known as Luke Air Force Base. So, you know, we've talked about him so much, but there's so much to tell about him. He was just a spectacular person. Didn't always obey rules, but that's how he got the job done. But back to the ceremony down there. The governor was not there. He sent a representative, Don Luke, who it was Frank Luke's immediate, or is Frank Luke's immediate nephew, was there, spoke about 3 or 4 sentences, but 2 of his sisters were also there. So the Luke family was represented by, I think, 3 people. But they had a nice ceremony. Luke Air Force Base had a flyover right on time. It was 1 minute after 9, I believe, of the jets flying over the Capitol. And they had several people there in attendance. And then after that, if you wanted to, you could go into the Capitol Museum. They have a very small display about Frank Luke, but they have a pair of his goggles and his baptismal certificate, and then some nice charts, boards about him. And that will be there through the end of this year. So it's a neat museum. I had been down there a few weeks prior and went all through the Capitol building. It's an interesting museum if you have time to check it out. So, I think that's pretty much it.
You did good. Emails. With that, we're going to have Miss Wanda come up. Wanda Sartain is the owner and operator of the USS Arizona. How long is that display? Did you say 40 feet?
Yeah, tongue to tail is 40 feet. The ship itself, I believe, is about 36 feet.
And that has got a lot of history. One of the things we'll bring up toward the end of your presentation, is the magic of the ship. It does have magic. With that, Wanda, the floor is yours, and we can move this up if you'd like.
Just a little bit. I don't believe there's anybody in here I haven't met or talked to at one point or another or been with. I've got 3 good friends right here that have taken on going out with me. I'd like to have Dennis stand up. You guys have met him before. He's one of the gentlemen that, well, Pastor Bill did the brain work on the ship and he did the handwork. So when we first restored it, he and my husband hand riveted a whole bunch of stuff. He did a whole lot of hand tin bending up there on that superstructure, put everything together. He's one of the people that was extremely instrumental in getting it restored in the very beginning. I've had the ship now, thank you, Dennis.
Yep.
I've had the ship now about 12 years, 11 or 12 years. The first couple of years, I didn't get to do much with it. She was in terrible shape. You guys have all heard that story. But in the course of the ownership, I had the privilege of meeting and talking to a tremendous number of Pearl Harbor survivors, both here in the Phoenix area and in Pearl Harbor twice. And I've had the tremendous privilege of meeting a lot of the survivors of the Arizona. There's only 5 of them left, and they range in age from just under 96 to over 98. There's 5 of them left. The one that has been here the most, I believe, many of you may have met him at the Capitol, is Donald Stratton. He lives in Colorado Springs, and when he's not in Hawaii doing something on December 7th, he's down here. He's been down here several times when I had the ship at the Capitol, and he always comes over and talks to me. This is what he looks like, if you can see this. He wrote this book, and it's called All the Gallant Men. And I'm not promoting sales of the book, although I hope you all will go buy one and read it, because I've never had a book that emotionally got to me the way this gentleman did. And you can tell he's the one that wrote it, because there's an awful lot of plain language in it, not literary correctness and things like that. But what got to me was my father was Navy, World War II. My father-in-law, which many of you met over the years, he passed away in May at 92.
Thank you.
He was a World War II Navy man. And my dad's brothers, all 4 of his brothers, were engaged in World War II. And we've all heard about the Depression. You know, most of us in here probably considered baby boomers. So we learned a lot about the Depression and the things that they did without, and the way they survived and so forth. And that's a lot of what he talks about in this book. And I've got some excerpts here, and a couple of folks heard this in July after the parade in Muntz Park. But the names of the gentlemen are Lauren Bruner, Ken Potts, Louis Conter, Don Stratton, and Lonnie Cook. They were all assigned to the Arizona, and there December 7th of 1941. And this is his words on this. He says, after graduating high school in May of 1940, I didn't have much to look forward to. I thought about college, but that didn't pan out. I looked for full-time employment. That was Depression time. But it was hard to come by. During this time, a Navy recruiter came to town. I listened to his pitch, took his literature, didn't look bad, giving me free room and board, and a paycheck of $21 a month. A steady paycheck. And he had put that in italics in the book, steady. A lot of boys joined the service for the same reason. Considering one of my future shipmates, John Evans, for example, he came from a family of 6 kids, and they all worked the family farm in the hills of Alabama. When he was asked why he joined the Navy, his answer was, I was hungry. My family was hungry, and that was the way to get food. He sent all of his money home, all of it. For spending cash, he shined shoes of his shipmates along with washing and pressing their clothes. How many of you ever seen an old Navy uniform? The blues were wool, so they were dry cleaned, but the whites and the dungarees, this gentleman made his pocket money by working for his shipmates. John joined the Navy because of the more immediate threat of his family's poverty. The Navy offered us a way out of that, and we took it. Most of us would not be back soon. Some of us would not be back at all. Too many never returned. None of us knew it at the time. We were not extraordinary men. Those of us who fought on that infamous day in December 75 years ago, truth be told, most of us had enlisted because there were precious few jobs to be found where we lived. The Great Depression had pulled the pockets of the economy inside out, leaving little more than an lint's worth of hope for the young men entering the workforce. Most of us who enlisted did so because we needed a job. Pearl Harbor changed that. A surge of patriotism swept the country, and everyone threw themselves into the war effort. Love for country welled up inside seemingly every American, coming out in the songs we sang, the movies we produced, the newspaper articles that were written. We were ordinary men. What was extraordinary was the country we loved. We loved who she was, what she stood for. We loved her for what she meant to us and for what she'd given us, even in the big times. Donald Stratton and Lauren Bacall survived the attack, and those are two of the 5 survivors left. They escaped the Arizona together. They survived the attack and the wreckage thanks to the bravery of a sailor on the Vestal, which was the repair ship on the outboard side of the Arizona in Pearl Harbor. It was a repair ship, and I learned the name of the sailor years later. His name was Joseph George. He was sent to cut the hawser lines attached to the Arizona. He was using an axe to cut them when he looked up and saw us 6 men in the fire control box located above the bridge. We were badly burned and getting worse from the fire below. George threw a weighted line 70 feet across to them. Those of you that are sailors know that was called a monkey fist. The men, all of us, one by one, crossed hand over hand. George was ordered twice to cut the line. He refused to let the 6 of us die. George wasn't recognized for his actions. He died in 1996. As a matter of fact, he was disciplined for refusing to obey that order. But on December 7, 2017, his daughter was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star with a V for Valor. It was presented to his daughter on the Arizona Memorial. I can't imagine if you guys, when you were younger, all of us did a whole lot of junk going from tree to tree. If we lived in the country especially, when you run a line, when you get out on it, it sinks in the middle. And then you have to pull back up. I can't imagine these gentlemen that were so badly burned doing that for 70 feet. Some people's housing lots aren't 70 feet wide. It says, after getting to the Vestal and then loaded on a motor launch, I looked back at the harbor billowing smoke and stared at the remains of the Arizona, engulfed in flames. The devastation of it swept over me way too much. I knew I'd lost a part of myself in the ruins of that ship, but a big part of my family and the men who died there. I had to turn my head away. I had to look away from my ship, from my home. And those of us that have been in the military, you know that the guys consider that ship their home. That's their girlfriend. That's why ships are called she. The only thing I ever had to compete with my husband was a ship in his pickup truck. I had to turn away from my shipmates, from the future that no longer awaited them, and from the part of myself that now would be forever entombed with them. 335 Arizona sailors survived that day, and only 5 of us remained. More than 65% of my body was burned on the Arizona. My body is a patchwork of scars and skin grafts. My hands were burned so bad I no longer have fingerprints. I was in the hospital for a year before I could return. I had to push myself up from my chair and then steady myself before I ever learned how to walk again and take my first tentative steps. Having survived a fire that took so much from me, I have an obligation to save the memories I have. I share what I remember when I can, but a day will come when I can no longer speak. That's why I wrote this book. This is a poem that Eleanor Roosevelt carried in her wallet from the day of December 7th, 40. Reads, Dear Lord, lest I continue my complacent way, help me to remember that somewhere, somehow out there, a man died for me today. As long as there be war, I must answer, am I worth dying for? That's the flavor of this entire book that this gentleman wrote. It's called All the Gallant Men. And he goes on to talk about what he had to do. They actually discharged him from the Navy and he couldn't stand it. He went home, he says, I can't do it. He went back to the recruiter. They made him go through boot camp again to prove that he was physically able to continue. All of these men, these 5 men, stayed in the military throughout the entire war. They all refused to be discharged because of any kind of injuries. What I came to understand was more the understanding of my dad and my uncles, how they felt about things, what they lived through. We basically presented a ready army after the attack because so many of them had come through the CCC camps, which were run by retired military personnel. They wore surplus uniforms in the CCC camps. And they were basically in a civilian military organization. So these young men that ensured our freedom had a whole different mindset about things and a whole different attitude about things, as did everybody in the country. You know, they were unrationed everything. But this book really brought home to me the fact that we need to pass this kind of information on to the younger generations, to our grandchildren. Most of our, I mean, none of us have any kids in here anymore that are at home, that are minors, but we all have grandkids. And they need to learn to appreciate, in my opinion, what they have and what they stand to lose. And that's kind of what he pointed out here. He was poor, he needed a job, and that's why he went in the Navy, just like the one man said, I joined because I was hungry. None of us have any idea what that's like. We've been through financial recessions, but we didn't live through what these people did. And this book was really moving. And that ship moves, that little replica moves a lot of people. last January when I was up there at Bill's place in the parade, Diane and I were driving along. Diane went with me this year. And this guy's looking at everything going by, and all of a sudden he goes, oh, the Arizona, and he leapt out of his chair and threw his arms up and says, oh my gosh, I love it! That's the kind of emotions that little replica brings out in people, and I never get tired of it, although sometimes it's a little emotionally overwhelming. Many of you with your vehicles answer a lot of questions, and some of them are tough. You know, Doc takes his helicopter out for kids to be able to get their pictures taken and to wear the gun belts and all of that. But the reality is, a lot of those helicopters never came home, and neither did the guys that were in them. And the kids don't understand that. To them, everything is repairable, replaceable, and disposable. And I work real hard working with young people to change that attitude. But if you get an opportunity to read this book, I think you'll all very much appreciate it, because our dads, uncles, brothers, whatever, came through this. and to understand what these people went through is very meaningful to me. Thank you, boss.
Now, hey, you gotta stay there, because I got a few questions for you.
You know where you can find that book?
Amazon.
I don't, yeah, probably Amazon.
Amazon.
My son gave me this book. He's an E9 over in San Diego. He's a Master Chief. And a gentleman gave it to him for his birthday, which was in March, and he read it. And the next time I saw him, he says, "Mom, I've got something that you absolutely have got to read." And he says, "And I'm gonna give it to you because I don't need it back." And this was it. And believe me, when you read it, and I hope you do, you'll feel the same way.
Sometimes
Question?
the older books are hard to find.
Yeah. Well, how many times have you and the ship been over to Hawaii?
I've been there twice with the ship. The ship has been there 3 times. It went with the original builders for the 50th commemoration. Perry and I went with Dennis and Bill and Kathy for the 70th, and then I went with a friend of mine for the 75th.
The first thing I wanted to ask you about Tora.
Mm-hmm.
Tell about where that ship.
The chief historian over there at the Valor in the Pacific Park, as it's called now, his name is Daniel Martinez. And when we were over there for the 70th, the night of December 7th, they had a special program for invited guests. We were invited for the showing of the movie Tora. And according to Mr. Martinez, that is the most historically accurate, factual piece of information you'll find on film. You know, it doesn't tell absolutely everything about absolutely everybody, but it is historically accurate.
And then, how did the ship, was this it was a model, it had an engine in it at one time.
The gentleman that originally built it did so in the early 80s in Northern California. He and his wife had a cabin up at Lake Almanor, which is just south of Shasta. And he built the ship up there. But he was 16 years old and a teenager in Hawaii. His father worked for the government in the territory of Hawaii at the time. And he witnessed the entire attack from the front porch of the home where he was born and raised. And his mission and his purpose was, he said he did not want people to forget. His wife is still living, and she lives in Reno, and she's in her mid to late 90s. And I talk to her as often as I can, because she's a gadabout. She goes and does things even at her age. But he didn't want people to forget. And he had 2 OMG sail drive engines in it, and if you look at the back of the ship, on each side you'll see some little round covers on the side that are screwed in. Those were the exhaust ports for the motors. And when Bill and Dennis rebuilt it, we took that hatch out and the stuff out that he used, but he would, right behind the superstructure, he had a hatch where he could go down and come up in the superstructure. And he had just the windows cut out, and that was his range of vision. And he took it up the Intercoastal Waterway from Perkins Springs, Florida to New York Harbor around the Statue of Liberty twice. And then he said it dawned on him that he shouldn't have done that with the Arizona, put motors in it. He said because he felt like he was being disrespectful to the crew that was lost and to a ship that would never sail again. So he asked me to leave it on the trailer, which I happily do. It's enough pulling it around, much less getting it on and off that trailer.
Well, the ship is kind of magical, and the next story I would like you to share with us. This last trip on the 75th anniversary, which we were also very privileged to attend. We saw Wanda there at the where the museum was and spent a little time there. It was very rainy that particular day.
Mm-hmm.
But to get there, it was like, what kind of hurdle can you have? Like, where are you going to stay? Well, you aren't retired military, so you've got to have an admiral or somebody else sign off on it. It was just, well, I'll let you tell the story, and then tell how within seconds everything changed.
The first time when Perry and I and Dennis and Kathy and Bill went, we didn't have any issues taking the ship into the memorial. Bill had contacted this gentleman sending pictures and everything, and when we got there, he goes, wow. It's like, well, we sent you pictures, what do you think it looked like? You think it was on, this big? And he had us display it directly inside the entry gates to the right side when you walked in.
Right smack in the middle.
If you've been there to the new memorial, there's a great big globe in the center there, and we were directly to the right of it. No issues whatsoever. For the 75th, I'm trying to get my Matson Navigation. I gotta tell you, those folks are wonderful, and there's a whole story about them in World War II in the Pacific that goes untold, and they don't wave any banners about it. So if you ever get a chance to check into that company, that's amazing. They donated the shipping both times. I paid nothing to get it over there or get it back. Dennis hauled it over to Long Beach both times, and we dropped it off, signed it in, all of that. And we rented a pickup truck from U-Haul over there. Didn't tell them what we were renting it for. Took our own slide mount and trailer ball and everything. But when I went back for the 75th, I was having trouble finding any kind of a place to stay that I could afford, because we paid our own room and board and airfare and everything. And Senator McCain's office was contacted, not by me. And he got a hold of somebody over there, and I had a letter that said that I could stay at the Navy Lodge directly across the street from the memorial. And I had a letter. It took me 4 days to get there without having to go through that mess at the gate. Nobody knew what to do with this letter. They're going, got a letter here, but nobody told us. Well, it wasn't my job to tell you, it was your office's job. It was just, and then the gentleman that was now in charge of the memorial, who was Daniel Martinez's boss, wanted me to present all kinds of insurance information on the ship. I said, well, I can do that if you if I hook a truck to it. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, if I rent a vehicle and it's hooked to the vehicle, it's covered by my car insurance. I can't find anybody that will insure that replica on a static display. That's why I have the things around it where people can't get to it. I don't want anybody to get hurt crawling on that trailer, or some kid to fall off of it or whatever. I couldn't get the insurance. And I had to go meet with this gentleman. Daniel Martinez was there and told him there's not an issue, she will stay with it, da-da-da. He hadn't seen it. Because we had the same issue, was picking it up after Thanksgiving. Matson Navigation offices are closed for Thanksgiving weekend. So there again, I had to wait until Monday to pick it up. And I thought, well, I'm just gonna drive over there and park in the lot and see what he says. Because I'd already met with him, and well, I'll see if I can get to a waiver for you and a whole bunch of stuff. I wasn't in that parking lot, and I had to pull into where the big buses park late in the afternoon. I wasn't in that lot 10 minutes, and he's out there and he's going, oh my gosh. He says, I didn't expect this. There's pictures of it all over there. There was people in the gift shop that still remembered us being there. Everybody there, when we were there, treated us like we belonged there. We got employee discounts for everything. And they did the same thing for my friend and I when we were there in 16. There's something about seeing that replica with your own eyes that makes a whole difference. A picture don't do it. It's like trying to send somebody a postcard of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
It don't cut it.
And did he kind of fall all over himself, getting tables and chairs?
Yeah, he did. He kind of fell all over himself, and he was out there. He's going to tell me how to back it up into where I wanted it.
Somebody telling Wanda Sartain how to back something.
Buses and everything else.
I finally told him, I said, sir, I can get it right where I want it to be. It's where we were headed before, and this isn't my first rodeo.
It's his first rodeo.
No, he says, oh, you drive this thing all the time? I said, yeah, I own it. I said, I was driving it myself before my husband got involved because he wasn't retired then.
Oh,
It's,
Of course, and I maneuver 45-foot buses in small parking lots too, so there's
Yeah.
not an issue there. Anybody have any questions about the ship, the purpose of it? Yes, ma'am.
Will you tell everybody about when one of their survivors dies and they want to be buried in the
Any-
ship?
Any of the surviving Arizona sailors have the privilege of being buried in the ship with their shipmates. The memorial wall in the back of the memorial has got all the 1,177 that were the result of December 7th. But then there's two little stem walls on the side. The one on the left side was almost full, and when we were over there for the 70th, they interred a man named Vernon Olson, and his wife came and invited us to come out there. My husband stayed with the replica, because I think he's seen burials at sea before, being a Vietnam Air sailor on an aircraft carrier. And this book moved me about as much as watching that whole thing. What a dignified service they do. And they take the ashes down and hand them to the divers, and they will put them inside the number 4 gun turret all the way in the stern. Mr. Martinez said that there's a fracture in that barbet, which is the big barrel that the gun turns in, that is offset about 3 feet. And they have put them inside there. When those divers disappeared, I had to turn and walk away because I couldn't breathe. The ship is still leaking engine oil. And I just barely walked to the other side of the memorial, right there where that oil comes up, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of it bubbled up, which would have been about the time that those ashes were put inside. And I lost it. I got to tell you, I really lost it. Vietnam War was personnel accounting. So we knew all of the killed in action, missing in action, POWs, people transferred in, people transferred out. I can't go to the Vietnam Wall for that reason, because my job put names on that wall. It really bothers me. But to see that kind of an interment, and in 2016 they did a double. It's the first time, Mr. Martinez said it's the first time they've ever done a double on December 7th. And the survivors of the Utah, which is on the backside of Ford Island, also have the same privilege.
well, I want to offer something to you, and we talked about it, but it's been a long time ago. I don't think you've got a piece of the medal from the Arizona.
I do not.
Okay. You and I need to work on that, and if you'll give me a number to contact him, since, well, you're a 501c3 now, and we're actually a museum entity, I would like to use whatever strength we could do to get that, because he kind of intimated
Well,
that,
he told me that he would see to it that I got something, but that man is so busy. I've never seen him actually standing still. Anybody that's talking to him is going wherever he's going. Dennis saw it too.
and I've met him, I personally met him.
Yeah,
so.
he's a wonderful guy, very knowledgeable, and I don't fault him at all for having let that slip his mind, but I haven't pursued it either because it's basically illegal for him to do that.
There's another thing though, when you go, if you get a chance to go down to the state capitol at that museum, there's a section probably from here to the wall that's in there from the Arizona.
Mhm.
And I tried to get this little latch thing off.
Oh, I threatened to jump that rail and pinch a piece of it.
It's pretty advanced in the rust stage, but
Yeah.
I said, is there anything you can do on the backside? And I even mentioned it to the curator, and she didn't want to touch that item, so.
there is.
I have Mr. Martinez's email and phone number.
Would you forward that to me so I can work on that?
What, by carrier pigeon? You know me and my computer.
I'll
I'll get it to you.
Text it to me, yeah, because that really needs to be done, and,
I just want a little piece to carry with the replica.
yeah, it doesn't have to
We
be.
did find out from Mr. Martinez, when they stripped the superstructure off the top, you know, when they topped it, that stuff's still on the island.
to Ford Island?
There's a
It's-
whole bunch of it.
there's a
whole
bunch of it over
pieces
there.
that they
It's
did
off
not
limits.
use on anything else that are laying
Off
out in the
limits.
sun rusting.
Yeah.
There is pieces there.
Mhm.
And he should be able to come through with that by some means
Well,
or another.
The fact that I'm a nonprofit organization now will help in his endeavor to do that without getting in trouble.
Okay.
Because I do know that he said, well, you know, we gotta, I've given pieces to organizations and stuff like that, but I'll see about getting you.
Well, and
So
if
he
not, I
kinda-
can try to maybe work something on our end, if he would do that, and then just funnel it directly to you.
Okay.
So,
Right.
there's, where there's a will, there's a way. The, gosh, I lost it. Something about Frank Luke I was gonna mention, too. We've got a picture board, and some of you have seen it, because we've had it in a couple different displays. But there's just kind of an idea tossed out. Frank Luke Jr. got by with a lot of stuff. A lot more than he should have. His commander was I forgot the guy's first name was Grant, Captain Grant. And on the picture, he's got a frown. I mean, he didn't look like a 2 Happy Meals shy of a whatever, but he wasn't a happy camper because Frank was such a deviant.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he did what he wanted to do.
He's kind
and
of
what
a
he wanted to do.
troublemaker. He got it done.
And he stole the commander's aircraft periodically. I mean, you just don't get by with that. But he did. And the reason why he did is there's another picture of a guy with a cigarette in his hand called Major Hartley. Major Hartley was his first commander. And so and many times he didn't tell Grant he was going to go up in the air with the aircraft and stuff. And it just, Grant was by the book. This is the way you do everything. And Frank Luke was just the opposite. But he would go to Hartley to get approval and override Grant. And Hartley shouldn't have done it, even though he was a major. He had rank on him and everything else, because it just destroys your chain of command. But that's how he got many of his missions done, and he was so successful at it, particularly on the balloons. He'd wait till dusk. Now these guys didn't have any navigation equipment at all. I mean, they had topographic maps, and I've got an old one from World War I that I put in the mannequin's hand that we've got as a replica with a uniform on it, and that's how they found their way home. And they tried to land when it got dark in any friendly field, because they were always operating behind enemy lines. But he'd wait till the balloons came down. It took several hundred people to pull the strings to get those balloons to come down. And when they were starting to come down, then he popped that balloon with an incendiary round, and it would blow up because they were hydrogen, filled full of hydrogen. And it would usually kill the 2 that are in the gondola, and then whoever was underneath this whole thing. So he was very, very successful in what he did, very accurate. And then I got this big sledgehammer that one of the members of the old club gave me, this big, heavy hammer, and he never carried one of those. But he did carry a hammer. I said, it's the only tool that he'd carry in the cockpit. I said, why do you think he would carry a hammer in there? And people said, oh, that's kind of crazy. Why would you do a hammer? And I said, because the Vickers machine gun would jam, and he'd whack that sucker until he got it going.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Now, that early aircraft were never, I don't want to get on the whole Frank Luke thing, but it is kind of interesting in a way. Well, they were never meant to be bombers, okay? They were really sightseers. They were kind of like the balloons. They were top cover for the balloons to keep them safe, so on and so forth. But eventually they said, well, if you're firing at somebody with a machine gun, you could probably drop bombs. Well, the bombs weren't very big. And what they do, the pilots would put them in between their legs. They were already fused and ready to go, and these pilots, usually one in an aircraft, would go over something they wanted to bomb, and they'd throw them right out of the plane. And then Frank also had a way of writing notes. If he didn't get the balloon that day, he'd write him a note. See you tomorrow, you're going to be gone. Drop a note and the Germans would get it. And they were kind of irritated by it.
How many veterans are in here? Am I the only female veteran? Yeah, okay. Our dog tags were kind of rectangular shaped, and some of them had the little niche in them for your teeth and all of that stuff. How many of you have ever seen how they made World War I dog tags? First off, they were round. They were round. Perry and I found a World War I dog tag making set when we were in Florida at a coin shop of all places, and we bought it. And it's absolutely complete. But they were individually stamped. Every letter, every number. I've got the entire set of the stamps, the little hammers in it and everything.
You had
And
to
I-
typeset it.
Yeah, it's
No,
got the
no,
little
no, no,
die.
no, they put the metal down and,
You got the hand dies.
Then took the next
Yep.
one.
You got a set of dies and you
and I have Perry's grandfather's World War I dog tags, and his, initially it said PVT on it, which is private. When he made corporal, they took, I don't know, some kind of metal and hammered right through the private, and then took CPL and put right behind it.
It's a neat kit, I see
And
that.
I'll bring it in sometime. It's
really
it's in a box about this big and about that tall.
What a find.
And every person's dog tags were individually made and hand done. There was no machinery to it. I'll bring it in for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you one question, and we'll go ahead and wrap
Yeah,
it up.
you've got me talking a whole lot longer than I thought
I
I was
know,
gonna.
no, but that's okay, we planned on that. How many people, were killed from the United States, of the troops we sent over there, in World War I? What would be the number?
Not very many.
Not very many.
Not very many.
More than you think.
Here, well, let me hear a number. Doc?
Are you talking Air Force or?
No, I don't know.
Everybody.
Can't remember, it was only a year, so.
5,000.
Transport.
That's a guess. Over 100,000 of our troops got killed in World War I. And we were a late entry in
Yeah,
World
really.
War I.
Yeah, very.
Trench warfare was nasty.
Oh, it was bad.
Well, look at the Russians, millions and millions and millions.
Oh, yeah, Russia horses.
Very good. Well,
World War
thank
II
you
too.
so much, Wanda, and I've got a little something here for you. And we'll take your
Thanks for allowing me to talk about the passion I felt with this book, yes?
What is your ship made out of?
It's a boat, fiberglass.
Fiberglass?
Okay, let me
Do you
give
have
you
a
the history
picture?
of that hull.
Sure,
Briefly.
sure, no.
Wanda, do you have a
The mov-
picture with you?
No, I don't.
Can you
The movie Tora 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 was a, Hollywood production, and all the ships that they showed in the movie were just little replicas and so forth. They cast 7 hull sets to represent battleships. They used 5 of them. The Arizona is one of the unused ones from that movie set. The Nevada in California that was just recently completed at a cost of about $350,000 is the other one. They both came from that movie studio, from a backlot auction. One of Mr. Gates's friends attended the auction and knew that he had a passion about building these little boats and stuff, and bought it and gave it to him. And it was not in half lengthwise, it was in half crossways. And when you see it, you'll see these lumps on the side, on each side. That's where it was put together. That's how Mr. Gates put it together. But it was in half amidships, not via the keel. But that's where the hull came from.
'Cause I've seen it so many
So
times, I've
there's-
never paid attention to what it was.
Well, originally, Mr. Gates had used marine plywood and some masonite and things like that, which was pretty much state-of-the-art back then, and marine paint and all of that. But when I got it, about late 2005, it was just falling apart. The deck was sagging, all of the little posts for the lifeline half of them were broke off. So Bill and Dennis replaced everything with aluminum and fiberglass. The
No
whole
wood.
superstructure is aluminum, hand bent. He probably went through a couple of boxes of Band-Aids, because when you
I
when you
drove my
cut
finger
aluminum,
a
that
few
crap is
times.
sharp.
Bucking aircraft rivets.
But it took
all
Mr.
aircraft
Gates,
rivets,
he was
yeah.
still teaching school, And they were only going up to their cabin on weekends and holidays, summers. Took him 3 years to build the Arizona. It took Bill and Dennis and a bunch of volunteers, including my husband, 3 years to restore it. It took the Navy 3 years to build the mothership. It's on a triple axle trailer and the hull numbers are 3 and 9. You think there's something magic about 3? I'm done.
Well, thank you, Wanda. I've got something for you. As we customarily do here recently is a certificate of appreciation awarded to Wanda Sartain for being an outstanding presenter of our military history.
I'm a member of this group.
I
I'm
know.
supposed to be part of it. I'm
Thank
the
you
only
so
one that
much.
has to pull what I own.
And with that,
Oh, no, you gotta